All right, welcome back. My guest today is Johnny Yorga. Johnny is a registered counselor associate in Oregon, and he specializes in helping men with pornography addiction and relationship issues through telehealth counseling from a Christian perspective. With master's degrees from Multnomah Biblical Seminary and Western Seminary, Johnny brings a unique blend of theological insight and psychological expertise to his practice. His passion is to help individuals find healing in their trauma and sexuality, leading to hope and wholeness. At Bridge Behavioral Health, Johnny offers a compassionate and respectful space for clients to explore their challenges and achieve personal growth. And he's dedicated to helping clients find peace in the face of addiction, suffering, and emotional struggles in order to reach their full potential. Thanks for coming on the show, Johnny.
Yeah, Savan, thanks so much.
So, please say more. Introduce yourselves to listeners.
Yeah, so I'm here in the Portland area. I grew up in the Fresno area, ended up in Clovis, California. Grew up there most of my life. Um, I think a lot of my story starts with my ancestors, my grandparents and great grandparents. They came over from Europe and the Yugoslavia area, and I just jump in with that because so much of who I am comes from who they were and the love that they had for their family and for God,
Mm,
and um, really God's love for them and how He sustained them through really hard times. My grandfather and my grandmother, they had to flee the country. There weren't really free opportunities to practice Christian faith there,
mm,
and they ended up having to leave, not without some serious persecution. My grandfather suffered some things there, um, and I say, the Lord's love for them and carrying them and sustaining them because they came to Southern California with really with almost nothing.
mm.
Um, on the way here, my grandmother was pregnant. They had a baby, my oldest aunt, my mom's sister. She was born in Italy on the way here, so they have a new baby, new country,
Wow.
in the early '60s, and I don't know how they did it because they didn't speak English.
Mm,
They're taking night classes to learn English and trying to work during the day. I mean, this story, a lot of families went through that coming to the States. So I'm so
yeah.
grateful for what they did and to provide a way, just being faithful and really God's faithfulness to them. And now I think my grandmother always used to say, I'm now the eighth generation of faith in our family. And
Wow.
the last conversation I had with her last year was just thanking her for all that they did. They were just really special people, always so happy, even though they had very little.
Mm,
So, I mean, that's such a big part of my background.
mm.
But my immediate family, I'm the oldest of three siblings. My sister, Allie, she just had her first baby with her husband. So I have a new niece.
Nice.
She's so precious. Have been able to see her a few times.
Do they live nearby?
They're still there in California.
Oh, okay.
It's a 12-hour drive from Portland. So my wife and I, we like to drive it. It's a beautiful drive.
Mm.
And if you leave by 5:30 in the morning, you're home for dinner. So it's a beautiful drive, and we like to do that maybe a couple times a year. Um, and then another big part of my background is athletics. I played baseball for 15 years. It's an amazing game. It teaches you a ton. It's a very cerebral game. They call it a thinking man's game. And one really cool thing about baseball is you learn how to deal with failure really quickly, or else
Mm.
you'll probably stop playing because even the best hitters, I don't know how much Savon you know about baseball, but the best hitters will get out 70% of the time.
Right.
These Hall of Famers, they're getting a hit 30% of the time. They call it, hitting 300 is pretty good. So you have to learn to deal with failure, move past it, and keep going. And I think that's taught me a lot about hope and kind of loving my teammates and encouraging my teammates. So
Mm.
love that game, played it a long time.
Mhm.
And then lastly, just about me, the Bible has been such a pillar for me, a cornerstone for me. It's been there in my lowest points. It's always there for me with words of encouragement, with eternal truths. And I feel like just in the past month, really, have been needing that more than ever.
Mm.
Maybe not more than ever, but just being reminded of how much Scripture means to me. I love it, and it's such a great collection of writings. I appreciate it a lot.
Mm.
hmm
Yeah. What was there something that prompted that going deeper with it?
You know, I remember from a young age, probably like 8 years old, I just had this idea in my mind of there's nothing, there would be nothing better for me than to have some type of a career or purpose in life centering around the Bible in some way,
Hmm.
because it's so beautiful. And I think God just put that love down deep in my heart for His Word. Um,
From a young age.
from a young age, it just
Mm.
it just made sense for me, and so um, pastoral work wasn't necessarily the focus. It was more of just like getting deep in the Scripture and letting it change me, letting it wash over me, shape me, so that I can be helpful to people and loving to people. Um, yeah, it's always been there for me, and I want to encourage others with it.
Your uh your first degree is in theology
Technically, biblical studies.
or biblical studies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um when you were studying at Multnomah,
Mhm.
um did you have the goal of becoming a counselor, or were you going to go into ministry?
So yeah, a little bit more on the story. I moved here to Portland 8 years ago, and I moved up here to do youth ministry with a local church, and I'm
Mm.
still doing that
Mhm.
on a couple nights a week with my wife, and we're involved with the youth. And while I was doing that youth ministry, I was going to Multnomah, and I had the privilege to study, get that degree. Um, and it wasn't necessarily for a vocational goal. It was, like I said, a privilege to have that opportunity to just go really deep into the scriptures. I wanted Old Testament, I wanted Hebrew, and Multnomah had it. I mean, that was their old slogan. It is, if it's the Bible you want, then you want Multnomah, something like
Mm.
that.
Mhm. Dr.
Um,
Mitchell. Yeah.
mhm.
Mhm.
So Dr. Carl Kutz and Rebecca Josberger, they were heading up the Hebrew program there, and they're so great. They wrote their own grammar, so they had their own book, and they taught it really well. So when I knew about that program, I knew Multnomah was the way. And so when I finished with that degree, I went into it somewhat open handedly and just praying, knowing that God would provide something. But when I graduated, it's like, okay, there's not really a job at the end of a Bible degree.
Mm.
So that kind of circled me back to maybe my one of my first loves was the human brain, but psychology and talking with people. That was my undergrad, was psych.
Mm.
So then turned over after that and went to Western for their counseling program, because they were doing really well and still are. Multnomah was going through some transition with their counseling program, and Western just kind of seemed like a good fit at that point. So got back into counseling at that point, having been married and needed needed a job. Um, but of course, it goes deeper than that. I could talk a little bit more about um, my love for counseling and how it just kind of lined up that I would be a counselor.
Hmm. Yeah. Can you share a little bit about what you've learned in youth ministry,
Hmm.
especially in Pacific Northwest?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think what's standing out to me is, I mean, just we had our youth gathering this past Friday night, and I think it was just a few of us. People were busy traveling, or um, it was just maybe 5 or 6 of us this night. And these young people, they had grown up. You know, I've been here 8 years, and now they're all in their early 20s now. And we just sat around and we looked at Isaiah 52 and just looking at the word together and hearing their insights on it and their love to see Christ in the scriptures
Mm.
was like, I was so happy sitting there and seeing their growth. And so what I've learned is it's going to be God that's going to carry them through. I can put in all of my efforts and try to give insight into their life. But being a faithful presence, I think, is the most important thing for young people, to just have someone who had gone through what they're going through, to just be there for them, to be a faithful presence, and to love them and encourage them, and help them to keep going.
Mm.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah. Was uh, your ministry with youth, was that one of the motivators to get a counseling degree?
Hmm. I don't think so. In my mind, I kind of view them maybe not separately, but I certainly have relationships with some of the youth one on one, that kind of counseling style one on one. I don't work with a ton of youth in my practice,
Mm. Mhm.
especially because I'm on telehealth. You know, when you get the 13-year-olds, they'll do this where you could just see just like their eyeballs like that,
Mm.
and it's tough for young people on telehealth. Um,
Mm.
so I've done a few uh, with younger people, but I'm primarily probably 17 and up usually.
Mm. Yeah. So that's a good transition. So what are some of the things that you're um helping your clients with
Hmm.
these days?
Well, primarily um, addiction is the primary thing I'm wanting to look at. Um, so addiction, the way I think of it is it's really chaos. Um, Addiction is one thing that we go to help us cope with uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, physical sensations. We go to something that promises temporary relief.
Mm.
But it can be very chaotic in our experience. Like we feel somewhat out of control,
Mm.
and we just go to that thing. And I'm helping clients manage that, really through emotional work, taking a look at emotions and doing it in a calm and deliberate way to help them create their own sense of safety or health and healing in their
Mm.
life. They can have some moments of solitude to really take a look at their life and their own internal experience. That could be really hard. It could be really scary. Um, I work through ITAP, International Institute for Trauma and Addiction Professionals, and Dr. Carnes has a book called Facing the Shadow.
Mhm.
And
Dr. Carnes.
yeah, the shadow, man, the shadow side of our lives. can be scary. I
Mm,
know it was for me to really take a look at that, kind of have a conversation with that side of me.
mm,
It freaked me out.
mm.
But helping people do that with the support of a counselor
Yeah.
has been, I mean, it's been such a privilege to do that.
When or how did you face your own shadow, Johnny?
Wow. Um, I've been doing it more, I guess, more directly, really just in the past year. Um, I remember that, like that first night when I'm just kind of walking through the literature for my own self. Again, I've been doing it for many years, but more deliberately recently.
Mm,
Um, for me, that shadow side at first was quite harsh with me, and it was scary to engage that side of myself. But it's been getting a lot better, and it's really interesting. We have these parts of ourselves, and whether they're adopting narratives or whether it's childhood or our own biology and psychology, to take a look at these things and create some form of harmony and helping those parts work together for us to move in the direction we want our lives to go.
mm.
It's been fruitful, and my wife's appreciated it, I'm sure, a lot. But it's hard work.
Yeah. Um, for for f- um for listeners who aren't familiar with the concept or the idea of the shadow, but maybe they're from a Christian background, they
Mhm,
may have been taught about the sin nature and um uh so uh
mhm,
can you share a little bit about like the similarities or difference
mhm,
for people who aren't familiar
mhm,
with that idea of
mhm.
the shadow or facing the shadow?
Yeah, I wouldn't make a direct connection between, oh, the shadow is my flesh, but the shadow side promises me, as a soul, I can offer you um, some gratifications in the flesh to help you feel better in this moment. So it's deeper than just flesh. Like flesh is one thing, but then like in my soul, I feel like I have. I feel like all of us do. It'd be my opinion that we have these um, different perspectives or beliefs, influences, voices, spirits, if you will, that promise us things or want to direct our lives in certain ways. And from my perspective, the shadow side, it's trying to protect, it's trying to help you feel okay, and it can use the flesh as one offering to help you feel a little bit better. And so just having that dialogue within myself through prayer, through working my own 12 steps. You know, I go to my group with other therapists,
Mm,
engaging that conversation with different parts of me.
mm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. The w- when when folks start uh therapy, sometimes they're choosing uh to get help. They're realizing um they're emotionally they're struggling, they're in pain, they need relief from anxiety, or their addiction is really affecting their relationships, their
Mhm.
work, or even how they feel about themselves. But sometimes folks come to counseling because uh, others are strongly encouraging them to do so.
Mhm.
Um, uh, what are your thoughts, Johnny, on starting therapy, starting counseling, if someone hasn't done it before? Uh, w- uh, what's kind of your approach to helping people get get off to a good start
Mhm.
with healing.
Yeah, I think what I could say is I love working with men, and I found more often men are more hesitant to start counseling, especially couples. You know, the guy in the partnership, um, not very motivated to start, kind of feeling like he's being drug in.
Right, right.
Um, so often the guys will say, "Hey, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be."
Hmm,
Um, I'm sure that's the case for a lot of guys. Many therapists do excellent work. Um, I just encourage clients to take it slow. We're going to work on what you want to work on. I'm going to try to be as relevant to you as I can, and this is for you. This is your work.
hmm,
I'm here to assist you um, with whatever you need. I can make some recommendations and things like that. But ultimately, that this is about you, and let's look at gently what you would like to do, and take it slow, and get feedback along the way. Make sure that I'm always checking in with clients, making sure they're doing okay, and just going at their pace. So if you're hesitant with counseling,
hmm,
um, I think that a good counselor can come from a completely different, even worldview and perspective, and help you. But
hmm.
if it's important for you to be with someone of like faith, then I would encourage you to consider that. And there's good counselors even in the Portland area that are doing good work from a Christian perspective.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So with uh y- with working with men, what uh what would you say are the the challenges men are going through or facing these days?
Hmm. Um, I hear like there's a larger narrative in our culture that's been placing a lot of pressure on men
Hmm,
um, to perform, and that our value is found in what we can provide. So I
hmm,
find that men are experiencing that pressure, um, and so our work is to um, help them look at that narrative, because there's some truth that comes from that. Um, but ultimately, like, okay, that might be true in some ways. Now, how can we shape that in a way that you can hold it and be okay with some of that pressure, and still
hmm,
moving, walking the life that you want to lead.
mm, mhm. So uh the pressure to provide
Yeah.
uh there's you're saying that there's some truth to it, but it can be overwhelming or too much,
Hmm.
and you're
Hmm.
helping guys navigate that.
Yeah, and um, my wife, even, we had a conversation the other day that she was feeling like some of her value. She was uncovering this narrative for herself that she was believing her value came from what she's able to accomplish.
Mm,
And
mhm,
I was so struck by her coming to me with that. We all feel that, I think.
mm,
Um, I feel that as a man. We're, Lord willing, wanting to start a family soon. We don't have any children right now, and
mm,
I'm like, man, I gotta get things ready. I gotta make sure my practice is successful. I want to be helping people, and so I unpack that in supervision. I don't want to let those things affect therapy, but I'm still a human being too, and so I feel
mm,
that pressure as
mhm,
well. I think a major thing is what's on my mind. What is my conscience kind of um, tapping me about? What are the things that I need to accomplish um, and get in order so that my life can be not just successful, but so that I could walk through those other pressures successfully because I know I'm handling what I'm supposed to be handling.
Mm. Hmm. The sometimes the pressures really affect uh guys. A lot of guys struggle with anger. What what's your perspective, Johnny, on helping clients who are struggling
Yeah,
with anger?
I love working with guys on emotions,
Hmm.
and we'll talk about emotions. What they are, where they come from, what are they for, and emotions are from God. He made us with emotions. Um, when you see a lion, you're going to feel afraid, and that fear is going to help keep you alive because your pupils will, uh, I think they'll constrict. You'll have laser focus. You'll be flooded with adrenaline. Your muscles will be filled with blood so that you can run. So this fear emotional response is going to help keep you alive to run from this lion. Okay, if the lion gets out of the zoo or whatever the case may be. We talk about emotions that way, that they're from God, they have a purpose. Um, Same thing with feelings of safety and love. When we feel those connections, positive emotions, we want to stay in that environment. We feel calm, our breathing slows, our pupils will dilate, and we'll want to remain in that place because it's a safe place to be and it'll help us survive. So we kind of tear down emotions a little bit to say that they're information for us. Um, and I think maybe going back to the shadow conversation and flesh, our shadow side might want us to avoid those negative emotions.
Mm.
It might create some chaos within us. We might turn to some avoiding behavior, whether it's substances or pornography or seeking out other partners, things like that are harmful for us um, in our flesh. Like we'll seek to make our flesh feel better for some of these really uncomfortable feelings of emotions. So I found that conversation to be really helpful for guys to say, hey, it's okay to feel really uncomfortable. It's okay to have really strong emotions, and
Mm.
it could be a really beautiful thing to have strong emotions. It is a beautiful thing because I believe God made us to have them for reasons for survival and also to glorify Him.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, that uh, for a lot of people, emotions are scary. They're illogical, uh, but to consider them as as information and
Hmm.
useful,
Hmm.
that's really helpful.
Hmm.
The yeah the uh, with uh you you mentioned that you work with folks with trauma as well.
Hmm.
How would you say traumatic experiences affect emotions and the regulation of emotions?
Hmm. Uh, in a very complex way, for sure.
Hmm.
We know that um, traumatic experiences can stay with us. The body keeps the score, all of that, and we can have flashbacks to them when we're reminded, when we're in a situation. Even like smell is such a strong um, memory. We could smell something that might trigger us, that reminds us of a traumatic event, or seeing something that reminds us of it, and um, it elicits that strong emotional response, and we feel that chaos. We want to run from it. Um, so helping people to slowly start taking a look at what's going on there. What are you experiencing? We don't necessarily have to unpack the details, but just starting with some basic awareness. Uh, what is it? like, what am I experiencing right now?
mm,
And starting to get familiar with who we are, and accepting ourselves and our experience in order to again move through it to start that healing process.
mm, mhm. Yeah. The as you describe that, I see like how uh just understanding what you're experiencing can bring more uh understanding and more peace
Hmm.
in chaos.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
I talk about um uh organizing your inner world, your inner life, your thoughts, your feelings, um because yeah, whether it's stress and anxiety, um
Yeah.
it can uh it can be so overwhelming,
Yeah.
and really uh it can be paralyzing sometimes,
Hmm.
and yeah, it increases the desire to numb out or escape, um with substances or experiences. It
Hmm.
definitely makes people vulnerable
Hmm.
uh to addiction.
Hmm.
um w- what uh so John, can you say a little bit about uh how counseling, how therapy can bring change in people's lives,
Hmm.
besides learning more about emotions and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So something I'm excited about is I just refreshed on um, some of the core of counseling theory. It's an older book by Scott Miller, Duncan. I think Johnson might be the third author, called The Heroic Client.
Mm,
Uh,
mhm,
it's a great book, and Scott Miller's doing great work. They're basically saying that change is happening all the time. And so when I sit down with a client in session, I ask them, what's different over the past week? What's been going better? What maybe hasn't been going so well? And I'll track it with some numbers. I ask just a few scale questions, 1 to 10,
mhm,
and I keep track of those. Um, and change is happening throughout the week. And it's not just because they're in therapy. Like, we're all going through change all the time.
mm,
And so it's looking a little bit closer at, this right here changed. What maybe happened right before that? What agency is the client responsible for in those changes, whether good or bad? And then we can unpack those, look really deliberately at what they're contributing to their success and failure. How can we tweak those, fine tune them, and just kind of let them out with a trained counselor who can listen well and listen in a non-judgmental way, and just holding the client up and encouraging them to courageously take a look at those things. So change, um, counseling is the business of change. In that book, they were talking about the railroad business kind of got got passed up by planes and the trucking industry,
mm,
because the guys with the railroads, they thought that they were in the train business, but it wasn't really about the trains, it was about transportation. So it was the transportation business. And so
mm,
counseling is not just the business of therapy, it's the business of helping people change. And so that was a great refresher for me. So change
mm,
is really the kind of the heartbeat of the work.
mhm. I like the uh when with working with folks, I use a narrative approach
Mm-hmm.
and talk about the hero's journey
Mm-hmm.
a lot, and facing uh uh facing challenges, and the life as a journey or a quest. um and so besides change, it like the the heroic aspect is overcoming barriers and fears, and kind of uh, facing shadow, facing uh, the need to be courageous in life and in relationships. Can you speak to that a little bit, Johnny? Like the um, where you see courage in your clients or even in your life and in your family.
Absolutely. I tell my clients pretty often, it's like, hey, you know what? Your work that you just did, um, I appreciate watching you walk through these challenges that you have because I'm
Hmm.
learning from your story, and you might tell me something that I can offer to another client in an appropriate way, um, as something they might consider for change. Like I was just telling a client the other day, they had kind of circled back to um, a similar problem that they've been facing, and I told them, I've watched you walk through this before. Like you've done this before, um, and tell me a little bit about. Do you remember what you did then? What that was like for you then? And what is similar or different about what you're going through right now? I really believe, and I love this quote by I think it's Edison. I've got it like on my website and even on my professional disclosure statement I send to clients. If
Mm.
we if we just did everything that we were capable of, not anything extravagant, just what we were capable of, if we did that consistently, we would astound ourselves. Because I
Mm.
really do believe
Mm.
that God made people in His image and in a very capable way to handle our problems and walk through them heroically. And sometimes we just need some encouragement from a counselor, from someone who can listen to us really well to help us come up with solutions that we already have that just
Mm.
might be difficult to implement. Again, it could be scary, it could be painful. But I give all the credit to my clients.
Mm.
I just listen, and then I say, "Oh, you mentioned this," and then I kind of pull on that a little bit and help them really solve their own problems. It's a privilege. I love watching clients when they can find success in their own lives. It's so cool.
Yeah, yeah. I uh I I like combat sports. Even before jujitsu, when I was a kid, I really liked boxing, and one of my favorite things was like a comeback.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and I love seeing that in clients' lives when uh life has knocked them down, or maybe even consequences and circumstances of their own choosing. You know, unwise choices.
Mhm.
Um, but like to battle back to health, restored relationships. Um, uh, when they start to believe in themselves,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
it's just it's awesome.
Yeah.
And certainly, like you said, like listening and like the wisdom or and the solutions, uh, not necessarily things that I'm saying,
Mhm.
but things that they come up with,
Yeah.
solutions for themselves. It's like, oh, yeah, for
Mhm.
like I always take notes, but sometimes I'm like, man, I'm taking notes. That's good. Like,
Mhm.
you know, that's
Mhm.
helping me.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they come up with stuff. So,
Mhm.
um, it's great. Yeah. The so uh a a little bit of a shift. What you mentioned personally, you're thinking about becoming parents, you and your wife. Um, uh, in the next year or the next few years, what are you? How are you wanting to grow and develop as a counselor?
Mhm. Well, I mean, the first thing is I gotta keep working toward licensure. I'm right
Oh,
there and close.
nice.
I gotta take that big exam.
Hmm.
So I'll be studying up for that. Um, that's kind of a big goal. Um, I love my supervisors, though. I'll probably keep them on just on a consultation basis to help stay sharp. And another thing I want to do is look at some group work. I love Carl Rogers. Western did a great job of kind of teaching a lot from his perspective. Kind of I guess the father of modern psychotherapy, very client centered and allowing people to just speak their experience and doing maybe some form of a process group. I would love to do that. Maybe in the evenings, once a week, something like that. Putting together some group therapy.
Hmm.
That's something that would be really cool. Maybe even um, here this winter, later this fall, or early next year, putting something together for a group would be really really awesome.
Mm-hmm. For men, primarily, or a men's group, or
I think that would be probably most helpful for guys, especially if it's maybe from an addiction flavor group, just to come and just share and hear other guys' stories in a safe environment. Uh,
mm-hmm.
I think would be helpful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So, uh, uh, really appreciate your time, Johnny.
Mm,
Uh, it's it's exciting to to learn about the work that you're doing. Such a huge need. Um, any any other thoughts that you want to share today?
mhm. Well, I want to go back to just that idea of courage. Um, this story in the Bible that really struck me. Actually, Jordan Peterson does a great job explaining this story. It's in Numbers, and it's the Israelites. They're in the desert, they're wandering, and man, they had just been delivered from slavery in Egypt. So they're under the tyrant king Pharaoh, and they're just being oppressed, and they're delivered, and they experience the freedom of being out from under the tyranny, but they end up in a desert.
Mm,
It's like, oh, we're free, but now I'm in a desert. And the story in particular is they start complaining to Moses about, why did you bring us out here into this desert? There's nothing to eat. We barely have water. Can you do something for us? And they start recalling some of the luxuries they experienced even in slavery in Egypt, the garlic, the leeks, the food, the meat that they used to have,
mm,
and God's anger was kindled against them, and He sends snakes in among them to bite them, and many of them die.
mm,
And it's like, okay, we're slaves, and then we're in the desert, and now there's snakes. And if that isn't a parallel for life, like
mm.
we think that things are starting to turn for good, and then the snakes come, and it's
And
like,
now there's snakes.
what
Yeah.
am I supposed to do about this?
Mm,
And so Moses goes to God on their behalf and pleads for them to get these snakes out of here. And
mm,
God doesn't take the snakes away, right? He tells Moses to cast a serpent and put it on his staff. And when the Israelites are bitten, Moses has his staff with the snake on it, and they're supposed to look at the snake, and through looking at it, they will be healed.
mm,
And we know that there's parallels there for psychotherapy. It's kind of really a great conclusion from the last hundred years of psychotherapy. If we can um, on purpose and of our own choosing face our problems,
mm,
we can experience healing. And the thing that's really cool is, and Jordan Peterson does a good job kind of broadening this out, then it's not just the snakes that you'll be healed from. Through that act of healing and deliberately looking at what's poisoning you, you become more courageous,
Hmm.
and that courage can translate into other aspects of your life. And this was so encouraging for me because if you remember, I think it's John chapter 8, 3 or 8, I believe. Jesus says, um, in the same way that Moses held up the serpent in the desert, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. And it's like, what? And
Hmm.
Jesus, Jesus is the snake. Jesus is the serpent. Um, and I mean, there's a lot more there we could talk about, but the idea is looking at him um, as the way toward healing for your soul, because he represents all that poisons us. Threat at birth, they were killing babies when Jesus was born, they had to flee. He was innocent and persecuted. And he wasn't just innocent, he was good. And they killed him.
Hmm.
The abandonment and iniquity of his friends, a brutal death in front of his mother. But the end of the story, we know, is not Christ's death, it's his resurrection.
Hmm.
So looking at him, we know that redemption is possible, and that really brought a lot of rest for my soul recently. And I'll even tell that story to clients when it's appropriate. I might bring that up, who don't even practice a Christian faith, because it's such an encouraging story to help us face the problems in our lives on purpose to experience healing. It's so good, and again, that's just why I love the Bible, because it gives that wisdom that can be hard, but it's so beautiful.
Hmm. Right. Yes. The so uh how can listeners learn more about you, Johnny, and connect with you?
hmm Well, I'm not a major corporation. I've got private practice, so that you can reach out to me directly. My website, bridgebehavioralhealth.com. You can read a little bit. I've got a few blog posts on there. I'm going to be doing some more blog posts coming up here on pornography addiction. Um, what is pornography addiction? What is addiction? So you can put in, my contact info is on there. You can reach out to me. I'm ready to work with you.
Great. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and we'll put your info in the show notes.
Mhm. Yeah, great, Savon. Thanks so much. Appreciate you. And yeah, it's been a privilege to talk.
Thank you.